Have you ever done something, said something, or felt something so entirely out of character that it left you wondering, who was that? You snap at someone you love. You sabotage a relationship that was going perfectly. You feel a sudden, violent flash of jealousy when a friend succeeds. And in the aftermath, you excuse it. You say, I wasn't myself. But what if I told you that in those moments, you were actually being more yourself than you are on any normal day? Welcome to the mind of the shadow. We all walk through the world wearing a mask. Psychologists call it the persona. It is the curated, sanitized version of who we are. It's the polite coworker, the dutiful child, the supportive friend. But behind that mask, beneath the surface of your conscious mind, lives a stranger, an invisible twin. This is your shadow self. And no matter how hard you try to outrun it, outsmart it, or ignore it, it is pulling the strings of your life. Today, we are going to explore exactly what the shadow is, how it was born, and why refusing to face it is the single greatest mistake you can make. The concept of the shadow was popularized by the legendary Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. Jung observed that human beings are not born fragmented. When we arrive in this world, we are entirely whole. A baby doesn't feel guilt when it cries for attention. A toddler doesn't feel shame when it throws a tantrum. They are simply expressing the full, raw spectrum of human emotion. But then we begin to learn the rules. We learn what is acceptable and what is dangerous. Your parents, your teachers, your culture, they hand you a psychological sorting mechanism. They tell you, be quiet, be nice, don't be angry, don't be selfish, don't be too loud. So what do you do with the parts of you that break these rules? You don't destroy them. You can't destroy them. Instead, you drag them down into the basement of your subconscious. Jung described this process like dragging an invisible bag behind us. Every time a trait is deemed unacceptable by the outside world, we toss it into the bag. If you were mocked for crying, your vulnerability goes into the bag. If you were punished for arguing, your assertiveness goes into the bag. If you were told your art was silly, your creativity goes into the bag. Over the years, this bag gets heavier. The shadow becomes the dumping ground for every human trait we have exiled. It becomes a reservoir of repressed anger, hidden desires, unresolved trauma, and taboo impulses. But here is the chilling reality about the subconscious mind. Whatever you bury alive will eventually claw its way out. You might be thinking, if I buried those ugly parts of myself, shouldn't they just stay dead? It doesn't work that way. Think of the shadow like a beach ball that you are trying to hold underwater. You can do it for a while. You can push it down with all your conscious strength. But the longer you hold it, the more your arms shake. You get exhausted. And the second your grip slips, perhaps when you're stressed, tired, or intoxicated, that ball explodes out of the water with immense, uncontrolled force. When you ignore your shadow, it doesn't vanish. It just operates in the dark, hijacking your life in ways you don't even realize. How does an ignored shadow manifest? First, through projection. Have you ever met someone who just instantly, deeply irritated you and you couldn't explain why? Their very existence made your skin crawl. Jung famously said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When we refuse to acknowledge a flaw within ourselves, our ego protects us by projecting it on someone else. The person who constantly complains about how judgmental everyone else is often entirely blind to their own harsh judgments. We despise in others what we are terrified to look at within ourselves. Second, through self-sabotage. Your conscious mind might want success, love, and health, but your shadow holds your deep-seated beliefs of unworthiness. So the moment you get close to that promotion, or the moment you find a healthy partner, the shadow steps in to dismantle it. It creates unnecessary arguments. It pushes you to procrastinate. It drives you toward addictive, numbing behaviors. Third, through explosive triggers. When a small, insignificant event causes you to react with a level of rage or despair that completely outmatches the situation, that isn't you reacting to the present. That is your shadow reacting to the past. It is the chained beast finally finding a crack in the wall. Ignoring the shadow doesn't make you a better person. It makes you a dangerous one. Because a person who believes they have no darkness is a person who has absolutely no control over it. By now, the shadow probably sounds terrifying, like a monster living under the floorboards of your mind. But this is where most people misunderstand Jungian psychology. The shadow is not evil. It is simply raw. In fact, Jung believed that the shadow is the seat of all our latent power. He said that the shadow is 90% pure gold. Remember that invisible bag we talked about? We didn't just put our malice and our greed in there. We put our wildness in there. We put our fierce independence in there. We put our deepest passions and our unyielding boundaries in there. If you were taught that anger is a bad emotion, you repressed it. But anger is not inherently bad. Anger is the psychological immune system. It is the emotion that tells you, someone is crossing my boundary. If you repress your anger into the shadow, you also repress your ability to stand up for yourself. You become a chronic people pleaser. To reclaim your ability to say no, you have to go into the dark and reclaim your anger. If you were taught to be humble and quiet, you might have repressed your desire to be seen. But in doing so, you suffocated your charisma, your leadership, and your artistry. This is why you cannot ignore the shadow, because to ignore it is to live a half-life. It is to walk through the world operating on a fraction of your actual psychological battery. You are leaving your best, most powerful tools rusting in the dark just because you were told they weren't polite. The journey of depth psychology, the journey into the mind of the shadow, is not about defeating the darkness. It is about integration. It is the courageous act of shining a light into the basement and saying to the monsters, I see you. You belong to me. When you stop running from your hidden self, a profound shift happens. The energy you used to spend holding that beach ball underwater is suddenly returned to you. The triggers lose their power. The self-sabotage stops. You stop projecting your insecurities onto the world, and you start living with radical, terrifying authenticity. You become whole. Facing the shadow is not easy work. It requires radical honesty. It requires you to shatter the comfortable illusion of who you thought you were. But it is the only path to true psychological freedom. In our next video, we are going to look in the mirror. We'll explore the 5 undeniable signs that your shadow is currently controlling your life, and how to spot the specific ways you are projecting it onto others. Until then, pay attention to what triggers you. Pay attention to your sudden anger, your harsh judgments, and your unexplainable fears. The shadow is trying to speak to you. It's time to start listening.